Muted.
Good evening. Sorry about that. I was muted. How are you doing today? My name is Marya Kazmi, also known as Brown Girl Interrupting, and this is Pain to Power, the show where we are talking about turning our struggles into our strengths. And I am very excited to be talking particularly today about the power and the way we're going to be analyzing power. Because sometimes the hardest part about power isn't about losing it, it's actually realizing that our body no longer trusts it. And lately, I've actually been noticing this about my own power and how it feels different. It feels quieter, it feels uncertain. And really, what I'm noticing is that it's almost like I'm waiting for this permission to show up. And it's not that I am losing something, but it's rather that it's almost my nervous system, right? My nervous system has forgotten what safety feels like, and that's impacting how I show up in my own power. We can't lead, we can't create, we can't even connect in the same way when our body doesn't believe we're safe enough to. So, power and the body are always in conversation. And today I'm really excited because that's exactly what we're going to be doing is having a conversation today with Dr. Tanji Reed Marshall, which I feel is so timely in given again some of what I just talked about in her work on understanding and we're really talking about her work and understanding our instructional power. So she reminds us that it's really not about control, it's about consciousness. And tonight, again, very excited to introduce Dr. Tanji Reed Marshall because she is a dear colleague bringing her wisdom and her lens with nearly 30 years of experience in education. She's the founder of the Liaison Educational Partners, who is supporting educators at every level at the intersection of curriculum, instruction, and culture to ensure that they have the mindset, skill sets, tools, and resources to ensure that every student gets the excellent education that they deserve. I am very, very excited to have this very special guest with us. Welcome, Dr. Tanji Reed Marshall.
Thank you, Marya. It's so exciting to be here to have a great conversation about power in education and power in life.
I am so excited for this because I mean, so first of all, I'm a little fangirl of yours. I don't know if you know that or not.
Thank
I
you.
met you first in Unbound Ed in
Yes,
my
ma'am.
work. And I mean, I think one thing that you said one time, and it's resonated with me and stayed with me for very long, is this idea that if you want a good answer, ask a really good question.
Yes. Because your answer lies in the question you ask.
Absolutely. And but that's so key because oftentimes we don't. So tonight we're going to ask some hopefully really good questions and have some
Get some
really
good
good
answers.
conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
And so, I always invite my guests on the show, and I want to know your personal relationship first with this idea of taking pain and turning it into power. And before I have you answer that, though, I just also want to remind everyone with us today, which I'm so happy that you're joining us, whether you're watching the rebroadcast or you're watching us live, make sure you've subscribed, liked, you're sharing a comment, interact with us. Dr. Marshall is going to be giving us some amazing tidbits. You want to make sure you ask her some questions while you've got her here and live with us tonight. So, pain to power.
Wow, that's a lot.
Does that
Yeah.
come up for you?
If I go through sort of my younger life into my adulthood, I experienced great loss very young. My dad passed away. School started on a Thursday, and he passed away that Tuesday of 8th grade. So, right. So we've had that like early, very large feeling of pain. And, that created a life where my mom became an unwitting, non-choice widow. So that changed the landscape of how we grew up and how we lived our lives. And then shortly thereafter, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. So, yeah, and this was back in the 1980s when the cancer treatment was not as flexible as it is now. and watching her work every day, Monday through Friday, never missed a day of work. She would go to take cancer treatments on Saturday mornings. She would come home and be wiped out sick for the rest of the day. We would get up on Sunday morning, go to church, be at church because she was the choir director and we had things to do. Monday morning, back at work.
Mm.
This idea that, yeah, you can be sick, but you just have to keep going was our story, and
Mm.
moving through that enormous pain at a very young age really sets your life up. You see life very differently. You measure relationships, you measure encounters, you just measure the landscape very differently. Then moving into college and graduate school, I got married, had kids, all the life things, um, and really learning about how to be a good or productive human takes a lot of work, and it
Mm.
takes a lot
Mm.
of reflection. It takes a lot of understanding of self. And for me, that understanding of self came through my own personal faith walk. And I don't talk about my faith walk in the book, but I talk a lot about what does it mean to use your power to, one, name it, right? You've got to name and recognize that you have it. And a lot of times, particularly with women, we don't like to recognize and name it. So we tend to shy away from the conversation of we are empowered people. But then in the
Absolutely.
classroom, because of very obvious differentials, there are age differentials, there are educational differentials, there are gender differentials, there are economic differentials.
Mm.
All of those differentials create environments where an adult really steps into and exercises measures of decision making
Mm.
that are power laden decision making that creates disenfranchisement, power protection, hopefully agency development, and certainly we want to get towards empowerment. But that sort of understanding my own educational journey, when I was in fifth grade, I tell the story a lot. I was the only Black girl in our fifth grade class. And of course, it was at that time of the year where we're learning about enslavement. And we didn't call it enslavement then, it was slavery. And my white teacher, I was the only Black kid in the class. My white teacher points in my direction to explain that people that looked like me were better suited to do the work of enslaved people because our skin could handle and absorb the sun.
Wow.
Yeah, fifth grade. Fifth grade. Fortunately for me, I had a mother who I knew when I told things to about school, she was going to be there. So the next morning, my mom was at that woman's door. And I, to this day, I have no idea what she said to her, but the woman never had a conversation or made a statement like that again, at least in my presence.
Mm.
And that pain and knowing that somebody's going to advocate for you created empowerment and agency for me. So that's sort of my pain to, looking
Mm.
at a woman. My mom is very young. My mom's only 20 years older than me. So my mom is just 81. And back then my dad passed away when they were in their 30s. So it's a long time ago. And just watching this person evolve and evolve and evolve, dealing with enormous pain at a very young age and having to power through. We had to power through.
Mm.
You know what I
Mm.
mean? Is the story. That's the story. The story is powering through it.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for sharing. No, but I think, I mean, you laid it out. There's so much that you've experienced, but also that you've watched, and how it's all come into your socialization and understanding of pain, but also these dynamics of the juxtapose of power with it, right? Which I really appreciate. And I guess if I would love to know, when you think about that, how did that influence you in your own perception of the way power worked for adults and for children? Because you talked about your mom, but then you also talked about your teacher and you being a student. So, what were some of those dynamics that you've learned about power just through socialization?
Yeah, what we learn is that one, theoretically speaking, right? So there's social dominance theory, and then there's power theory that kind of runs alongside and they sort of intersect each other. When you look at social dominance theory, theoretically, we learn that people in power are going to work in ways that maintain their position.
Mm.
They're also going to be less likely to pay very close attention to those over whom they've got authority, right? Because there's so many, they're spending a lot of time sort of maintaining their power. They don't take as much time to think and care deeply enough about those over whom they've got authority. What that
Mm.
does in classrooms is that because we have very, very clear dominant cultural norms and perspectives and people who are part of a dominant culture, that particular group of people is going to be a lot less likely to take the time to learn deeply about those quote unquote over whom they have authority and power, those who are in minoritized groups. They're also going to do the things that maintain their positionality. So, one of the
Mm.
things I talk a lot about, we have a power survey. We talk about 5 aspects of POWER, and the first thing on that is the position. They are going to work harder to maintain their position. That is why in classrooms, you might find that teacher or even that leader in a building or in a district that when someone questions them, their first instinct is defense
Mhm.
because they're protecting their position. And particularly when there's an adult to a student dynamic and a relationship, that adult is going to feel a measure of insult. And
Right.
there really is, I don't know if you're, well, I'm old enough to have, in the 80s when there was a war on drugs and they would have that cast iron skillet on a
Mm.
stove.
Is your brain on drugs? Yes.
Yes, your brain on drugs.
Yes.
There's an actual, and I have a video in one of my courses that I give out that I share with people. It's your brain on power. So power acts as a dopamine activator in your brain, in the brain center.
Mm.
And when people get that hit of power, it activates something in their brain almost like a drug. It's like serotonin, it's a
Right.
drug activator in your body, in your brain. And when they feel that positional threat, they're going to act in ways to protect that center of themselves. We also know by the research that when a person is perceived in themselves less skilled and have measures of insecurity, they're going to protect themselves more. They're going to engage in power protecting behaviors a
Mhm.
lot more because they've got to maintain their sense of powerful self.
Mm.
So
And oh, sorry.
no, no, go ahead, go ahead.
No,
Yeah.
well, so I mean, I think we're going to get in. I definitely want to unpack a lot of what you've said here because there's a lot of layers, and we've got an audience that is educators, but we've got some audience who are not educators. So we want to break all this down to make sure everybody's still with us and staying with us in the depth, I think, and the importance of what you're talking about. Because to your point, as we opened up, is that this is yes about educators and power, but it's also about internal and personal power. So
100%.
we want to make sure that everybody is with us, and you put some really good points out that I just want to elevate. You talk about this connection between positionality, protection, and I hear control. A lot of it is this control with lack of empathy. So we're taking the humanization out when we think about power in a way where we are wielding it to control. And that it sounds like, when you talk about your example, and thinking about what you talked about with your teacher, right? That's a very clear example of a power move. Um, but then I would also say what I hear is that when you talked about your mother, that's a very different example of a power move. So as a child, when you think about yourself, to help us to get a better sense of what children may feel in those moments of those different ways that adults show up for them. Tell me, like, for you, what those two very different experiences told you about power dynamics and where adults are, where maybe even children are.
Yeah. So I would say, as a child, children learn the lines very early. They understand the lines very, very early, depending upon the type of home they're growing up in. And for me, like, I understood the line of authority and power soon, right? Very traditional
Mm.
home. You know, my mom said things and there was not a whole bunch of questioning about it. Right. There was,
Mhm.
and there was some questioning. And then there was like, when you questioned too far, you understood that you'd gone to the line and it was time to come back from the line.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, okay, you're at that line. You might want to dial it back a little bit. I felt measures of both security and, I would say, on some levels, trepidation.
Mm.
Because, as a child, you're born, humans are born inquisitive. They want to know things. They are exploring things. And if you grow up in a space where you are held back from that, it creates measures of frustration. It can also
Mhm.
create measures of doubt. It can also create senses of instability and senses of insecurity because you can't trust yourself, right? You're not allowed to ask. And to your point of, let's
Mm.
take it out of the education space. You have listeners I've encountered. Education's my second career. I worked in very toxic corporate spaces
Mm.
where people were power protecting, creating disenfranchisement all across the spectrum. And it was very clear that, and I was in retail. So retail is a very, it can be very toxic. The devil
Yeah.
wears Prada is not so far off the mark.
Right.
Right. And you learn your place relative to the positionality of others. And you
Mm.
understand mechanisms of ownership based upon how the work is doled out and distributed. So you get into this realm of power over something and someone, as opposed to power to and power with, being in
Mm.
community, in shared relationships, in shared, almost shared accomplishments, shared goals, right? So that people are really beginning to think through, what does it look like if a person has authority over me because they have they're a VP and I'm not, or whatever. There are going to
Mhm.
always be lines of, I would say, decision making, right? They're going to always be those lines of, somebody has to have the bottom line, yes or no. That is not the issue. The issue is not that. The issue is, how are they using that authority? Are they using it according to that social dominance theory where I am in authority, I'm dominating over you, and
Mhm.
I'm not going to spend the time to get to know you? Or am I in community with you saying, yeah, you know what? I have to make the bottom line decision. But, and let's have a conversation. Let's be in community. Let's talk through the dynamics of whatever the situation is, so we come to a consensus around it, so that you and I are in community around a problem of practice, around a big
Right.
issue, around something. So we grapple with the power over and the power to.
Right. Well, and it sounds like there's a lot of shifts in how we view it, but there's also it's an understanding of, well, what are you experiencing now, though, right? So there's a combination, right? And you keep mentioning socialization, which I love because we have talked about this connection between. I speak on this a lot in my courses. This idea of those patterns of socialization, and power is certainly one of those patterns that comes up. So, one of the things that you elevate a lot in your book is this shift, this mindset shift, particularly from control to consciousness.
Hmm.
You tell us a little bit more about how does that play out then in the way that power, and the book itself is Understanding Your Instructional Power. Make sure you go and get it. The link is all down here and below. Um, but yeah, so how does power really start to shift from control, as you've been saying it, right, to that consciousness? And what does that look like for us?
That's a great question. You'll notice it primarily through your reactions with others.
Mm.
The reactions of others become your mirror, and they become the signal that something needs to change in your interaction. Something has to change in your behavior because you're not getting the outcomes, the responses that you think you are getting. How this plays out in the corporate world: high turnovers in particular departments, right? You have those departments where they may have great
Absolutely.
bottom line numbers, but man, is it a leaky bucket.
But what are your
There's
patterns? Yeah.
revolving door, in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out. I worked for one of those, right? And it's the relationships that really have to be interrogated. How it works out in the education world, you have that principal who cannot keep a staff. You have that teacher who is a high referral flyer, right? Because the
Mhm.
relate and it's very hard to suss out sometimes. It's easier, and you and I are both familiar with rubrics, right? At the 4 level and the 1 level, it's easy, right? You're either great or you're absolute awful. It's in
Right.
the gray where it's hard to suss out, particularly when you have
Mm.
teams where they may have good numbers, right? So you might have a team in a sales department where they've got great numbers, but there's something that's just not right, right? It's underlying toxic. There's something people don't want to be there, but they might
Mm.
be making great money. They might be great salespeople. They're self starters. They can do it on their own, but they there's a like I said, there's that revolving door. So
Right,
the
right.
people, the responses that you're getting, they are the trigger. They're the mechanism. Data becomes the story that you must begin to understand, right? We have the
Mm.
qualitative data and the quantitative data. What is the story being told?
I love that, and what I'm hearing is that it's and this goes beyond. So I know we're talking about corporate and we're talking about education, but this is a personal thing, right? It's that
Oh my
consciousness
goodness,
and
yes.
awareness of yourself and others. It's this combination, and we talk about this often. And I think even when we're talking about healing, right? That's the thing, right? And it can be packaged in so many different ways. Emotional intelligence, whether that's what you're thinking about when you're just thinking about consciousness and power, like there's so many different ways, but that's the constant. The constant is, what do you know and understand about yourself? What do you know and understand about others? And through that, you start to change practice. It's through that you start to see the things you need to see. And I
Mhm.
love it because you're elevating the nuances of it showing up. And we really have to have a keen
A
eye.
keen eye, a keen
So
eye. Yes.
yeah, a keen
Mhm.
eye, right? And so you also talk about this idea of shifting from liberatory power to protective power. Is that part of that keen eye, and how does that show up?
So when we look at it, I talk about protecting self and systems. The first thing
Hmm.
we're going to do is protect ourselves. We're going to protect ourselves from what feels or perceives to be harm. So we say it this way: your brain doesn't actually know if something is legitimately harmful to you or perceived as harmful. So, people have heard, like, you've got this amygdala, it's this almond sized thing in the back of your brain.
Mhm.
Its whole job, it's got one job only: keep you living, keep you alive.
Right.
So, if you are in a relationship, or let's just say you were in a conversation, let's say you and I are in this conversation, and somewhere in that conversation, a statement is said and it triggers a moment of fear, potential harm to you, your brain's job is to keep you alive so it will shut it down. right? And so in
Mhm.
that moment, that is when the brain begins to perceive threat and perceive pain. And so the protection over time becomes your knee jerk response to things. And it
Mm.
becomes the way in which you approach relationships when you are
Mm.
overly guarded, right? You're overly guarded. You are, you have bitterness in there, but you mask it by just, there's a shell, and you protect yourself against harmful or perceptions of harm, right? So, and I'll go back to
Mm.
the education example for a moment. You have a student who is inquisitive, and they have grown up in a home where they are allowed to question. They get to school, they have a teacher who doesn't like that. And so when the student is questioning, the teacher perceives it as a threat to their position and their knowledge base. Therefore, they're going to react and come against the child. In another setting, if there is a manager, a leader who likewise, same thing, is a bit insecure, maybe they're a new manager and they have this person who wants to understand and they're trying to ask questions. Those questions are a threat to their sensibility of knowing who they are. Personally, when someone is getting to know you, but you don't necessarily trust their motives, the body
Mm.
is going to send out pain signals. It's like warning signs, right?
Your
And it's
central nervous system, right? Like, you
there
are
it is.
not feeling safe,
You're
and
not
that's
feeling
it.
safe at that moment. And it may not be real. This may not be
But it's your
legitimately. This is
socialized
there it is.
perception.
Perceptions. It's the perception of pain and physical threat.
Yeah.
It's the perception of threat that triggers a response of, that freezing, that, all those.
And
The,
I
the
love
three F's.
that. I love that because I think it goes back to also this idea. I literally had a conversation this week about it, in this idea of sometimes we think everybody sees things the same way as us,
They do
right?
not.
So they obviously, nobody does, right? Like, we're all born into different worlds, into different families, into different experiences. Even when there's similarities, there's a difference, right? We, even as siblings, like my siblings have different stories of their childhood than I do, right? Like, it
Same
is
with me.
there is no one person who lives exactly the same as anyone else, right? But I think that is sometimes that nuance element that we don't see. I was having a conversation with some educators in particular. We were, about this idea of manners with children. And that's that one thing, right? That's that trigger of what you see as one way and the only way of being is not the only way of being, right? So it becomes now this oppositional conversation because there's a value put on what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. And to your point, those threats in a classroom then become referrals, discipline issues. And now, rather than seeing the humanity of a child, I'm controlling the behaviors of a student in front of me, or controlling the behaviors of my employee, or controlling the behaviors of the person I'm in a relationship with
Yeah,
because I have a perceived threat.
absolutely. There's a very famous quote that says, "We don't see things as they are. We
Mm.
see things as we are."
Yeah,
And that's the
absolutely.
truth. Like, we see things through our lens, and we do have, there are social norms around generalized acceptable patterns of behavior. Someone gives you something, you say thank you. You want something from someone, that is, say please. Those kinds of just, generalized human interactions. And then there are other ones that are specific. And you bring up a great point about the hidden curriculum that is weaving through most of our heads and most of our interactions. We have this rolling sort of list that we don't tell anybody about, but we hold people accountable to it in our own mind. And when you don't hit
Mm.
them, then that's when those subjective measures come into play. It's like getting your job evaluation, and your manager is evaluating you. and they're giving you, whether you met the goal, 80% towards the goal, 20% over the goal, whatever. And then there are these other personal things that they are lowballing you on because they have a set of measures in their head that they never told you about.
Right. I love that language, and I see that Phil de Montaigne was in the chat, sharing that that's very deep, right? And it definitely is. And please make sure that if you're in the chat, if you're on here right now watching, that you like, you subscribe, you share a comment, you share a question. Do you want to know and understand something different about power and how it shows up? And I appreciate that, right? Because it comes back to the quote itself, which is we see it as we are, right? Our lens. I really appreciate the language of this idea of the hidden curriculum. And I think again, it's in alignment with everything. We call it curriculum, but I would say it's like the hidden tenets of even our lived lives and how we show up for people. But tell us a little bit. Tell me when you think about that, how you break that down, so that we all understand this idea of the hidden curriculum.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So I'm a member of a sorority, and we were on a call with a partner group, and we were talking about how to run a candidates forum.
Mm.
And the partner kept saying things like, well, we have a standard of how the candidates forum should run. Our standard is whatever, whatever, whatever. We have this standard.
Mm.
And if we had just left that air as it was, the subtleties were they have a standard, but we do not. So she had in the back of her mind a criteria about a standard that they had, but she didn't share it with the rest of us. And so the way we conducted, or other groups, because it was myself, is my organization and 3 other organizations, and then this one organization kept saying we have a standard, and the other 3 of us were left out of the standard. And I finally said to her, I said, I need you to stop for a moment, and how about you share the standard you're talking about, because it feels like you got a hidden thing here. And as soon as I said, oh, no, 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 I don't have a hidden anything. I said, well, you keep talking about your standard, but you haven't said that there is a standard. Now, if she had said that there is a standard, that's different. Mm-hmm. Because that means all of us, that there is there's an agreed upon way
agreed upon. That's right? The key, right?
Right? No. She kept saying, well, we have a standard.
Yeah.
So the hidden curriculum. So curriculum is a body of knowing, right? So there's bodies of knowing everywhere. You're right. And a hidden curriculum is a hidden body of knowledge, of knowing, that is sort of generalized to a group. And when it is hidden, it is very dangerous because people protect it. And they use it as a weapon against which to measure others. But I don't know what the measure is. And I'm being held to a thing that I can't measure up to because it's inside you. It isn't known. It is the we have, as opposed to there is a, right? There is a set of knowledge that we can all agree upon. And kids and people of color, particularly African American boys, get sucked up into the hidden curriculum so quickly and often because there's just so many rules out there that are hidden away, sequestered. I will use the language of law. They are sequestered, but yet people are still held to them. There's this information out there. It's like being a day late and $1 short, or always missing the fast bus, like you're 10 minutes late to something all the time. That's what it feels like. That there's a bus schedule out there and no one told you.
And what a great way to break down the idea of when we say structural barriers.
Mm-hmm.
There's your right there example of what structural barriers are, because if I don't even know the measure, but you want me to be meeting this measure, and if I'm not meeting it, you're not explaining what that measure, there's no understanding. And I would also say there's a culture piece in there, because your measure is based on you,
On you.
not based on a shared understanding, right, of what measure is. But that is exactly that. And that is why we see such huge discrepancies and such huge disproportionality in behavior referrals and special education, in everything we can possibly imagine, our academics, when it comes to our students of color, particularly our Black and Brown students, our Latino students, right? And what that shows up as. That is so powerful. And I got to go to the chat because I saw some comments and I want to make sure that we see those and elevate them. I think Film de Montaigne had some comments in here. Um, and thinking about that, I'm learning so much. Yes, you are. And here, let me just plug it right now. If Dr. Reed Marshall doesn't, is that you can learn so much on a regular basis on Thursdays
On
on
Thursdays.
Let's Talk Power Live.
That's
Can you tell us
right.
a little bit about where we can learn so much more, Dr. Tanji Reed Marshall?
Thank you for that. Yeah, I do. And I thought about it again based upon my book, Understanding Your Instructional Power, Language and Curriculum and Language Decisions to Support Each Student. I started the show because, number one, power is a real thing. It is real in education. We just don't want to talk about it in operational ways.
Mm.
So we meet every Thursday. I just moved the show to 5:30. So every Thursday at 5:30 p.m., we gather and we talk about issues of power in education. And I talk about it in operational ways. I tend to do sort of 3 to 4 week cycles of information. So earlier in the year, my roots are in secondary education. And when I came into education, I came in from retail. So I have both the business side and the education side. In education, I leaned into secondary, particularly in the middle school area. And there's just so many great conversations happening at the elementary school, right? Like, we got to get Johnny to learn how to read by third grade. Like, get Johnny to read. Yes, yes. And then we got to get Johnny to graduate in high school, 100%. So we've got these wonderful conversations about early literacy, foundational learning, and secondary graduation, portrait of a graduate, reimagining high school. I've been on, panels and discussions and groups talking about reimagining high school, all like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this place called middle school where kids go.
Oh, the middle years,
That's
right?
right. They go someplace after fifth
Yes.
grade. They're not in the, like, ninth grade is not a Cabbage Patch. They go someplace. So I spent a lot of time talking about the messy middle and really getting into the brain and what's happening in the body during that time. Talk about literacy, break down the power dynamics, talk about the courses that we have, spend some time really looking at each of the 4 dimensions of the power framework, and really doing some work around recently. The federal government has been on this wonderful, dynamic, horrific seesaw, have been sharing really important planning tools for state leaders, because we don't know what's going to happen. We just know something is. And the degree to which a state leader can be prepared to communicate, to continue services, all of those areas that need attention. We talk about those and give tools for those as well. So every Thursday, 5:30 live on YouTube, and it's the channel Let's Talk Power Live.
And Let's Talk Power Live. Make sure that you are checking that out. And I believe the link is also in the description down here. So make sure that
I
you get
appreciate
it.
Yeah, we talked a lot about and this past February, we did a real deep dive about the power in history. So much that was not known about history. We elevated wonderful Black women voices. We just did a whole sort of our work around Hispanic Heritage Month. So we do a lot of work around that. And there's a channel right there. I appreciate that. The book link is there as well.
And again, what I love, and I heard you say, is there's a framework you're talking about. You're
Yeah.
talking about tools. You're talking about planning tools, resources. This is not just you learning, but it is taking away pieces that you can apply to your leadership, to your education, in your classrooms, to all of the spaces. So please make sure that you tune in. But now, right now, we're here, and I
Yeah.
just want to know what might be as some starting guidance, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody's going to tune in to Let's Talk Power Live. But before they do, this Thursday, what might be some internal questions that
Mhm.
leaders should start to ask themselves before they start to act from that place of power to check, right? Is this control? Is this protection?
Yeah. The first thing they want to ask themselves is, who do I hear the most from?
Mm.
Who am I hearing the most from? But who am I hearing the least from that I might need to go check on? We tend to
Mm.
lean into the loudest voice, that squeaky wheel, but sometimes it's the quiet ones that are opting out of the conversation. And one of the other questions I like to have leaders talk about with themselves is looking at their power. How do they really distribute the positionality of it? Right? We ask
Mm.
about the power, we ask about POWER. So, number one, your position. Who has positions in your building? Were those positions pre-existing, meaning we have roles, right? So we've got roles in our buildings and in our offices. So, right, we can go either way. We have ones that are just there because they're there, right? It's the system. The system has a principal, they got an AP, we got that.
Mm.
I'm talking about the positions of soft power that really, really run the machine,
Mm.
right? Who are they? And were those people there before you got there? And so they're just there? Or are these people you are inviting because you are recognizing that the landscape might need some new voices?
Mm. Mm.
The one other thing I ask people to think through, and there's an exercise that we do, is a memory as a power center. We do a walking down memory lane as a power center exercise. Ask people, when's the first time you understood power? How
Mm.
did you understand it? Where did you learn it? How did you understand it? And then how do you exercise your authority? Because we think that we exercise it in this very judicious way. We don't. I'm just going to go on the record and say, you don't actually exercise it in as judicious a way as you think you do. So
Mm.
but you must ask yourself the question, how did I first learn about power? And
Mm.
how do I exercise my authority? Do I centralize it or do I distribute it?
Mm.
And one of the things that we offer is a deep dive in our power inventory in our book study. So we have different levels of book study. So we have an author-led book study where they can work with me to go through a book study, and then we have materials where they can do a self-guided book study on their own. But that question of how did I learn about power and how do I exercise it is very important. And then asking yourself about ownership. Who primarily owns the decision making in your space? Is it centralized to you? Is it in a very, very small, tight circle? Or do you have as many representative voices as is humanly possible that don't block decision making? Because sometimes it can be like too much, right? But
Right.
if you can get it, do you have representation enough where you are able to get decisions made and made well? And then we look at a factor of the work that's being done. Does everybody really understand it? Do they know what the work is? Not the job they've got to do, because I know what my job is, right? But do I know what the work is? Like,
Mm.
what's the work? And then we ask questions around environment and we ask questions around relationship. And that's our power inventory
I
that
love
we invite
that.
people to take
And
and
that's so
explore.
comprehensive, and I think it
Mhm.
gets to all these layers of mindsets, beliefs, but also those socialization patterns, and it also, again, gets to practice, like, what's the work? What's the role that we have to play in actually doing things differently?
Yeah.
And for me, you and I have talked about, my courses also has a framework, and I think when I think about it, there's such a connection between my return framework
Mhm.
and this idea of unpacking these patterns. And so I love it. I see Kevin Guinea in here. Welcome. This is one of my friends from Substack, and I love that you come and join me, Kevin. Do you
Hey,
think we
Kevin.
mostly mimic our leadership experience by
Yes.
who we thought was effective? That's a great question.
Yes, Kevin, we absolutely do. We mimic because unless we are actively learning to disrupt the automaticity, you have to be active in the disruption process. Otherwise, you will mimic. Because if you
Mm,
thought that was effective, why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you do it? Because it was effective. But
right.
unless you have a deep enough understanding of who you are as a person, how you handle leadership, and how the impact of your leadership, because that person's leadership was effective with you, you don't know if it was effective with those around you. That's a different
Mm.
thing. It's a very different thing, right? And so you're going to need to look at effectiveness. One, my lights just blew out. I'm so sorry. That light literally just blew out, and I
That's all right.
that's
You're
like,
fine. We can still see you and hear
okay,
you,
great.
and we are getting the message.
Great. So that is why you got to know whether or not that effectiveness was broadly effective,
Mm.
or was it,
Mm.
who with whom was it effective, and
And
then you can ask a different set of questions.
I love that question, and I appreciate your answer, and I also I'm thinking, right, that goes back to the layer of, like, the socialization patterns, like, where have we been told that
Hmm.
this was effective, right? And, Phil DeMontagne says, "I feel like I should have paid for today's show, LOL." Right? Well, you should. You should come and pay for all of our courses for both me and Dr. Reed Marshall, because we are teaching and learning in all different spaces, right?
100%,
Actually, so to
100%.
that point, like, I am curious to know how much, because a lot of my framework is really about the healing element of healing ourselves
Right.
and this idea of return. But do you see that there's a part of healing that comes into the way leaders are able to even perceive their power, understand their role, and examine it the way that you want them to examine?
Of course there is. There has to be, right? So effective leaders do that. They spend a lot of time understanding what leadership is in both small and large ways, right? Starting with themselves as a leader. So who am I as a person? And how
Mm,
does who I am as a person impact the way I lead others, right? And that comes
mhm,
with understanding the relationship between power and authority. People are authorized to do things. That's just how the world goes. And there is not something inherently wrong with that, right? That's not wrong. We have to have decision making bottom lines, of course. And yet, it is the way that we exercise that. Um, Beverly Tatum says, power is the smog in the air of every relationship. And
mm.
it is. It is the smog in the air of every relationship that you have. And right,
Ooh,
100%
ooh,
right.
I'm, like, thinking about that one now. That is such a impactful statement. Power is the smog in every relationship that you have, every relationship,
Yeah, the smog in the air. It's the
because there's
smog in the air.
always some balance of it.
There is. And it's never to say, there, we I talk a lot about, the four dimensions, and I talk about six types of power, right? As a leader, you're going to be using and pulling the levers of all of them in any given situation. The balance is, are you still able to build agency and move towards empowerment?
Mm,
That's the balance. Are you able to do that? Are you able to pull those levers when you need to while maintaining a person's humanity?
mm.
Right? Because sometimes you just have to use coercive power, bottom line, because you just got to get ish done. and so is not getting it done. So
Right.
sometimes you put foot in it and boom, that's it. Right. And sometimes you lean into your reverent power, right? That relational power that says, because you and I have a relationship, because we are most alike, then I can use reverent power as a lever, right?
Mm,
Sometimes I use reward power as a lever, right? That carrot. Sometimes it's going to be my legitimate power because I'm the one that signs the check. So I'm
mm,
going to lean into that, right? So you're going to use those levers across most anytime when you need to. But it
mhm.
is about, do you know enough about you, enough about the situation and the people to do them in a way that does no harm? Like, don't harm people. How
Right.
about we don't do that?
So there's an empowerment, but there's also a level of humanity that's coming into this,
Has
I'm
to be.
hearing. So those are key. Those are huge.
Has to be.
And this is so many amazing things. Please make sure that if you haven't done it yet, you're following Dr. Tanji Reed Marshall. You are following me. You are
Please follow me.
subscribing
Yes.
to both our channels, Let's Talk Power Live and Brown Girl Interrupting. And you need to know more because I know all of y'all do. All of y'all do. I know I got some of my educators here in the chat. Those of you who are not educators, you can still learn some more because I know there's a lot more on power coming soon from Dr. Marshall that we're going to be talking about. And thank you, No Holdbacks TV. Welcome, like and share. Thank you for always supporting. So appreciate you for sure, Tasha. And I love it. I see L. Brandon Wilkins with
Yeah,
us.
that's right. She says, uh, you have to remember that too much power will leave you powerless. That's a phrase I had coined. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. If you use, yeah, and it really is about this judiciousness, right? You've got to be mindful, that consciousness. How aware are you? Are you aware of what you are doing, and is it causing harm? I talk very, very clearly about my own journey of being a power protector. I had a very tight persona that I worked to protect it. And it wasn't until I really understood and saw. You asked me, how do you know? You see the impact of your enactment of
Mhm.
speech, right? Speech actions are actions, and your
Yeah.
actual actions on others. And when you see that, you have a choice, right? You have a choice to make. Either you lean in and stay there, and you recognize it as harm,
Mhm.
and then you shift gears, or you maintain power protection. And I chose not to maintain power protection because it's really harmful. And there's a story, I talk about that story very, very clearly in the book, and really dig into how you make those shifts, right? How do you really move from disenfranchisement into power protection? How do you
Mhm.
get there? The roadmap is very clear, and steps and exercises to foster the growth in that way.
Mm. I
Yeah.
love that, and please make sure you go and get the book as well. And I'm thinking, when you said that, this idea of examining our own power and how it shows up, I think about just, again, bringing it to outside of education is my relationship with my children, right? That was actually a really big shift for me, as this power
Mhm.
dynamic was part of it, and it was recognizing that I was doing power protection. I was protecting myself, right? And there's harm, there's trauma, there's all kinds of things, right? But this is what the work is. The work is recognizing, because I would also say that a lot of leaders, some of their decisions aren't from education
No.
necessarily, but even from personal experiences
Oh,
of where has
100%.
power played out in your life, right?
That's why
What
I
are you
asked.
holding on to, right?
That's why I asked, how did you learn about it? Right?
Yeah.
We tend to learn about it at home first. So we look at the socialization cycle, right? That cycle of socialization. It
Right.
happens.
Love that
You have a
cycle, right?
catalyzing event, right? You have a catalyzing event. Yes, that's right. We were colleagues. Yes, yes, yes,
I
yes,
love
yes.
that. So
Mhm.
Dr. L. Brandon Wilkins says, I
Yes.
remember when we were
Uh,
colleagues at CMS, Dr.
yes,
Marshall, I
ma'am.
too am a very direct leader. Power protection is important, right?
Yeah. And
And
yeah. And you have, and then not only do you learn it at home, but you are in multiple groups. and the socializing happens across multiple groups. Dr.
Mhm.
Wilkins, I would love to, share with you about book studies and where you can really have this conversation with your colleagues, as it really is something very important. And I tell people, once you read it, the toothpaste is out of the tube. You cannot put it back. You will see the world differently. I promise you.
Yes, you will, and you
You
have to
will.
go and read it, you have to go and follow Dr. Tanji Reed Marshall. There are so many amazing things that she is saying, and I really believe, I mean, I'm in classrooms, I'm in a school district, and I feel this is that missing component of many leaders' conversations is how is power being wielded? How is it being used? How is it controlling this idea of the hidden curriculum that you mentioned, right? I mean, there's just so much good knowledge that could transform the way that we lead. And again, leaders who liberate. That's our goal is empowerment.
It
And
is.
again,
It is.
connecting it back to self. So you mentioned the book study, and I wanted to give you an
Mhm.
opportunity to talk about. Did you have an opportunity that you wanted to offer to some schools regarding your book study that you want to use our platform to talk about right now?
Absolutely. So when you are a leader in a building or a district and you buy a set of books of 30 to 35 books, I will do a free 1 hour session as an author book talk. So that's one way you can do it. We also have on demand learning opportunity called Instructional Power 101, where you go in, it's a 7 module self guided course where you are able to learn on your own, learn the foundational pieces of instructional power. And then we have author led book studies that you work with me to do transformational work in your place of employment, either at a school, in a district, at an organization, using the principles of instructional power that really get your environment from disenfranchisement as close to empowerment as you can get it. Because we understand that, particularly in schools, they're not set up for system level empowerment. So you have to get empowerment through pockets. But to
Mm.
get there as closely as you can, we offer the partnerships in those very specific ways.
I love that, and I like that you, named it, right? It's not system level empowerment that's gonna happen, so but we're not going to stay there. We're
Right.
going to stay in recognizing what is our sphere of influence, what is our locus of control, because all of us have some within our spaces. And how can we start to make those shifts? I love it. Tasha from No Hold Back says, never stop learning. I love books like these that teach. Absolutely. You should go pick up Dr. Reed Marshall's book is excellent. I need to get this book. Yes,
Yes.
go and get it. The links are all below. Go and follow. Where do we follow you? How do they follow you? Social
Yeah.
media, any
Social
other
media
places?
link.
Where else?
Yeah. You follow me on LinkedIn at Liaison Educational Partners, or you just pull up my name. You can subscribe to the channel, Let's Talk Power Live. And yeah, those are the main places. I'm on Facebook, I'm on IG, but I spend most of my time on LinkedIn, really sharing ideas. And of course, please join me on Thursday at 5:30 p.m. on Let's Talk Power Live, where we operationalize power in education and power in other spaces.
Operationalize, friends. That is the key term. We often talk about just learning, but this is operationalizing, which means tools, mindset shifts, behaviors, practices, all of it. I
And we
love
look at
it.
policy too, because
And policy.
one of the challenges is that we have so many practices and we confuse practice with policy. And so we've got to
Mm.
distill the two.
I love that. That's comprehensive. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. Before we leave, just one last thing.
Yeah.
If you were to think about just one shift you want people to walk away with understanding about power, what might that one starting shift be?
Be willing to engage in power with as opposed to power over. That's
There
the
we
one.
go. Power
Power
with,
in community. Mhm.
Power in community. And hopefully, my friends, you are here for power in community with us in Pain to Power. Thank you so much, Dr. Tanji Reed Marshall. This has been an amazing conversation and so informative. So truly informative. I am walking away with so many gems. I know so many of our listeners are walking away with gems. And if you are watching us in the rebroadcast, please make sure you like, share, subscribe, comment, leave a comment. I can't say that enough, y'all. Leave a
Yeah.
comment. Leave
I
a comment.
respond to all
2
of them.
seconds. 2 seconds. Leave a comment.
I
Um,
respond to everything. People like my stuff. I'm like, thank you for liking my
yes.
post.
Oh, I am
Yeah.
interactive. If you leave a
Mhm.
comment, I will comment back for certain.
Exactly.
But
Absolutely
it
will.
is helping us in the algorithm. Let's be honest, friends. Okay.
Let's be.
And it is also helping to know what you need, what you're curious about, having you ask questions. We'll answer them.
That's right.
Whether it's about power in your instruction or it's just about pain to power itself and healing, both of us can support you in that. And please
Absolutely.
make sure that you are following me. I am Brown Girl Interrupting. We come live to you every Sunday at 8 p.m. for Pain to Power on this channel, as well as I have courses coming. Actually, courses launch, not coming. Courses launch. We just successfully finished my first cohort. Yes, I love it. Thank you so much. And in January, I will be starting my second cohort. So please make sure
Fantastic.
you come and join me. These courses are called Empowerment Unlocked, very much similar to we are in the same space, right? And I love it because
Absolutely.
this is that alignment of these
Mhm.
conversations we need to have in so many layers, right?
That's right.
Personal,
Absolutely.
instructional,
Mhm.
leadership, all of the places is understanding ourselves better helps us to understand others better and show up in the ways we need to. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much. Love it and love you. No Holdbacks TV. I love that my Ranters family has shown up. And thank you always to my amazing producer, Mr. Montaigne, also known as Ja or Logic, whatever you call him. He shows up the same way in all of it. Amazing. So, and thank you to all of you for watching, for sharing with us, for staying with us. Please make sure you follow us. All the links are below. If you want to follow me, go to my website, www.browngirlinterrupting.com as well. Thank you. And thank you so much again, Tanji. This was lovely.
My pleasure. I've had a great conversation. I appreciate the
This was
time.
wonderful. And peace, love, and light, friends.
Thank you.